Rafiq sent his last voice message to his wife in Dhaka on a Tuesday morning in 2023. He told her the heat was unbearable, but the pay would change everything for their daughter's schooling. 12 hours later, Saudi authorities classified his death as natural causes. He was 31 years old. Rafiq joined an estimated 21,000 workers who have died or disappeared under Saudi Arabia's vision. 2030 mega projects. But here's what Riyadh desperately doesn't want the world to discover. 74% of these deaths were quietly classified as natural causes. Not workplace accidents, not heat exhaustion, not construction injuries. Natural causes for young men in their 20s and 30s dying on construction sites in 50-degree heat. In this video, I'll expose the death toll that Saudi Arabia has been systematically hiding behind medical paperwork. I'll reveal the investigative findings that Riyadh tried to suppress and show you why the world's most ambitious construction project may also be the deadliest. What happens when a government builds the future on the bodies of men whose deaths it refuses to honestly count? Human Rights Watch published findings in 2024 that many governments have conveniently ignored. The data is staggering. 1,420 Indian migrant workers died in Saudi Arabia in 2023 alone. Those numbers come from records kept by the Indian Embassy in Riyadh. Of those 1,400 deaths, 74% were classified as natural causes. This isn't normal mortality. It is a classification system designed to avoid accountability on an industrial scale. The pattern repeats across every nationality. 80% of 887 Bangladeshi deaths during the first 6 months of 2024 received the same classification. 68% of Nepali worker deaths between 2019 and 2022. Same label, same paperwork, same silence. Bangladeshi government records reveal that at least 13,685 of their citizens died in Saudi Arabia between 2008 and 2022. More than 1,500 died in 2022 alone. That is more than 4 Bangladeshi workers dying every single day. And approximately 20% of NEOM's workforce comes from Bangladesh. To understand the scale of what is happening, consider what NEOM actually demands. Saudi Arabia's flagship mega project spans 26,500 square kilometers of desert along the Red Sea coast. At its peak, more than 100,000 workers were deployed across the site, many recruited from South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Africa through labor agencies that charged fees workers couldn't afford to pay back. The original promise was simple: come build the future, earn wages impossible to find at home, and return with enough savings to transform your family's life. But that promise was broken the moment workers arrived and discovered a system designed not to protect them, but to prevent them from speaking. Let's examine the evidence, piece by piece, starting with what is perhaps the most disturbing finding. An ITV News investigation estimated that more than 21,000 workers have died or disappeared since Vision 2030 began. 21,000. That is not a statistic from a war zone. That is the human cost of building luxury resorts, mirrored cities, and artificial ski slopes in the desert. Human Rights Watch documented 9 specific cases in detail. In 5 of those 9 cases, the workers who died had actually collapsed at their workplace before being pronounced dead. Collapsed at their workplace in extreme heat during physical labor. And the official paperwork said natural causes. That is government speak, for we refuse to investigate. Consider the conditions. Summer temperatures at NEOM construction sites regularly exceed 50 degrees Celsius. Workers report 12 to 14-hour shifts with minimal shade and inadequate water breaks. When a healthy 28-year-old collapses during a 14-hour shift in 52-degree heat, calling it natural causes isn't a medical conclusion. It is a bureaucratic decision. One Bangladeshi construction supervisor, who left NEOM in late 2023 and asked to remain anonymous due to ongoing legal threats, described it to me. He said, "When a man collapsed on site, the supervisors would wait before calling medical. Sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. By the time help arrived, it was too late. Then the paperwork would say cardiac arrest, natural causes. I watched it happen 3 times in 4 months. 3 men. All under 35, all healthy when they arrived. The working conditions tell an even more damning story. Workers at NEOM and other Vision 2030 sites have reported systematic rights violations that go far beyond unsafe construction practices. Human Rights Watch documented a pattern of confiscated passports and seized mobile phones. Workers were effectively trapped, unable to leave even when conditions became life-threatening. The kafala sponsorship system legally ties workers to their employers. Quitting means deportation. Complaining means blacklisting. Speaking to journalists means termination and a flight home with nothing. Most workers paid recruitment fees of $2,000 to $8,000 to agencies in their home countries. Money borrowed against family property and future earnings at crushing interest rates. By the time a worker lands in Saudi Arabia, he is already in debt. The employer knows this. The recruiter knows this. The system is designed so the worker can't say no. One senior project manager at a labor rights organization that monitors Gulf construction described the broader system. He explained, "The recruitment debt is the mechanism of control. A worker who owes $5,000 and earns $400 a month can't afford to complain. The entire system is designed so workers absorb the risk while developers absorb none." Perhaps most troubling is what happened to those who tried to speak publicly. The case of Abdul Rahim al-Huwaiti became an international incident. Al-Huwaiti was a member of the Hawatat tribe, indigenous to the land where NEOM is being built. When he publicly refused to leave his ancestral home and posted videos online documenting the forced evictions, Saudi security forces killed him in 2020. 3 other members of the tribe were subsequently sentenced to death for resisting the displacement. 20,000 people are expected to be forcibly relocated for the project. One Pakistani engineer who worked at NEOM and relocated to the UAE described his experience after a colleague died on site. He told me, "Abdul Wali Skandar Khan died right there on site. A guardrail fell on him. We all saw it. His family received no compensation, no investigation. They shipped his body home within 72 hours. After that, everyone understood the rules. You don't talk, you don't complain. You work until you can leave." It was like he never existed. So what is enabling this systematic cover-up? Several factors are converging simultaneously. First, the kafala system gives employers extraordinary power over foreign workers. Workers can't change jobs, leave the country, or access legal representation without their sponsor's permission. Second, subcontracting chains are deliberately opaque. NEOM contracts with international firms who subcontract to regional companies who subcontract to labor brokers. Accountability is diffused across 4 or 5 corporate layers. Third, independent media access to NEOM is effectively banned. Journalists who attempt to visit report being turned away, detained, or having equipment confiscated. Fourth, sending countries like Bangladesh, India, and Nepal depend heavily on remittance income. Their governments are reluctant to press Saudi Arabia when billions in foreign exchange hang in the balance. Finally, the medical certification process operates without independent oversight. Saudi doctors classify deaths. Saudi authorities review the paperwork. At no point does an independent party verify whether natural causes is accurate. The evidence of this crisis isn't hard to find if you know where to look. The Financial Times has published multiple investigations, citing over 20 anonymous NEOM employees. The Guardian's long-form investigation into Gulf construction deaths has been shared hundreds of thousands of times. ITV and BBC documentaries have reached millions of viewers. Reddit communities and human rights forums have accumulated thousands of posts documenting worker testimony. The evidence base grows larger every month. Yet, despite this mountain of evidence, Saudi Arabia hasn't changed the classification system. It hasn't opened NEOM to independent labor inspectors. It hasn't acknowledged the death toll. What is particularly damning is the silence. Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund has aggressively pressured media organizations to suppress coverage of worker conditions. International firms contracted by NEOM have inserted non-disclosure clauses that specifically prohibit employees from discussing workplace safety incidents with external parties. The potential consequences extend far beyond the construction sites. Saudi Arabia faces a cascading crisis that could undermine the entire Vision 2030 program. International pressure is building. Human rights organizations are calling for formal investigations. The 2034 World Cup has intensified global scrutiny of Saudi labor conditions. Foreign investors already skeptical of NEOM's finances now face reputational risk. No Western institution wants its name on a project where 21,000 workers have reportedly died. The recruitment pipeline itself is under threat. Bangladesh temporarily suspended new labor migration to Saudi Arabia in 2023. Nepal has imposed restrictions on certain Gulf employment categories. What does Saudi Arabia's leadership know about the true death toll that they aren't saying publicly? Internal safety audits almost certainly paint a picture far worse than official embassy statistics suggest. Finding solutions requires acknowledging an uncomfortable truth. Saudi Arabia built the most ambitious construction program in human history on a labor system that treats workers as disposable inputs, whose deaths don't require honest investigation. Here is the sentence that summarizes this entire crisis. The world's most ambitious project was built on the world's most disposable workforce. Independent safety monitoring could be mandated, though NEOM's management has resisted any external oversight. Kafala reform has been promised since 2020, though implementation remains minimal. Independent autopsies could end the natural causes cover-up, though Saudi medical authorities show zero willingness to invite scrutiny. Recruitment fee regulation could break the death cycle, though enforcement across multiple jurisdictions remains practically impossible. The window for course correction is narrowing. Every month of inaction adds to the death toll that Saudi Arabia will eventually be forced to confront. Saudi Arabia sold the world a vision of the future, then built it on a labor system that belongs in the past. The workers who poured the foundations and dug the trenches are dying in numbers that would constitute a national emergency in any country that chose to count them. Honestly, you've been shown CGI renders of mirrored cities and desert ski resorts, but behind every render is a workforce that Saudi Arabia has refused to protect, refused to investigate, and refused to count. Are you watching this unfold, or do you know someone caught in this system? Your voice matters more than any government classification. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want the truth about what is really happening behind Saudi Arabia's mega projects. And this is just the worker deaths. Wait until you see what the internal financial audits reveal about where $50 billion actually went.